Hey, what's going on, everybody? So this is your boy, the non-lawyer, coming back at you again with another video on the T.I. and Tiny drama, or the T.I. and Tiny saga. And I want to know, I want to ask the question, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it's definitely over for T.I. and Tiny? Don't answer that question just yet. Wait to the end of this video to answer, because I have actually come across some information. And this is exclusive information in the sense that I don't know that anyone on the internet has actually covered this information in detail as you're going to have it covered for you now, right? So you know that the lawyer for Sabrina Peterson, T.A. Blackburn, or Tyrone Blackburn, has already filed a defamation of character lawsuit, and he's allegedly also gone to the authorities, and we're just going to cover a letter of which he allegedly has sent to the attorney general or the authorities, right? So let's just go ahead and get into this, right? And again, after we read this, you guys answer the question: do you think it's over? Do you think it's definitely over for T.I. and Tiny, right? So this is a letter. T.A. Blackburn, Law Tyrone Blackburn, member of the New Jersey Bar Association, federal membership of Eastern District, New York, Southern District, New York, and DN. And it gives his address, which we're not really going to repeat on the internet. But it basically goes on. It starts off: Honorable Xavier Becerra, Office of the Attorney General, State of California. Dear Mr. Attorney General, my firm represents 11 individuals, 10 women, and 1 man who have all been victims of Clifford Harris, T.I., and his wife, Tamika Harris, Tiny, collectively TNT. In all, within the past 2 weeks, we have been contacted via phone by over 30 women with allegations of TNT company, and aided by several individuals in their employ, have kidnapped them, drugged them, raped them, terrorized them with threats of death or physical bodily harm. The various events of interest span 15 years and have occurred in California, especially in the city of Los Angeles and the states of Georgia and Florida. So it goes on. Of the 11 individuals retained by my office, one of them was a resident of the state of California at the time of her drugging and rape. These women are unaware of each other, and without any leading on my part, they encountered eerily similar events of abuse, forced ingestion of illegal narcotics, kidnapping, terroristic threats, and false imprisonment, right? So then in this section, he goes on to the actual claims of some of the individuals, right? So it starts off: summary of California claim, alias Tay, and then it gives that person's date of birth, and it basically gives the date of this incident. So this allegedly happened around September 2005, and it was in LA, California. And here's a summary. In 2005, she was in the U.S. Air Force and stationed near LA. She was 22 or 23 years old at the time. She and Nyla, also in the Air Force, went to a club at comedians Little Duval's invitation. Tiny and T.I. were sitting in the VIP section. Tiny pointed to them and invited them over. Tiny was doing all of the talking, and T.I. was sitting off on to the side. Tiny sat next to Tay and offered her a sip of Patreon, which Tiny was in the process of drinking. She sipped the drink and passed it to Nyla to try it. T.I. then announced that they were leaving to go to another location. Tay and 2 other girls rode with them. T.I.'s accomplice took Nyla with them. They went back to his hotel room, where one of the girls attempted to slip T.I. her phone number. Tiny saw and became upset. T.I. asked her to leave, and since she was with the driver for the third girl, she left with her. Tiny then suggested that Tay, T.I., and herself freshen up before the other guests arrived. They went to the shower, where Tiny washed T.I. and Tay. When Tay left the restroom, she felt lightheaded and dizzy. This was an uncommon occurrence for her. She only had 1 drink on her own, plus the drink that Tiny gave her. She sat down on the bed, and Tiny laid behind her in a crab position and began rubbing her buttocks on Tay's back, giving her a back butt massage. At that point, Tay started feeling a little sick and began throwing up. T.I. came over and attempted to put his foot into her I'm just going to bleep this out, but you see this what this is, and put his foot into her private parts. She told him no, and the next thing she remembers was waking up naked on the couch with the towel thrown over her head, with a very sore private part. So unfortunately, I have to flag some of these words because YouTube will flag it, and I risk the video being taken down. It's unfortunately that I have to do that because I'm simply just reading what's on this document, but that's the way things are. There's nothing I can do about it. But anyway, moving on. Ti's security banged on the door and told her she had to leave and arranged for her to be dropped off at a gas station in LA where she met her friend Nyla. The aftermath: has suffered from severe depression, anxiety, PTSD, and paranoia. She does not go out much and does not trust drinking in clubs or accept drinks from anyone. And then we get into another victim from the state of Georgia, alias Jane Doe number one. This happened in and around the summer of 2006. And of course, it was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it basically goes on. In 2006, she was 17 years old, senior at Tri-City High School. Ooh, this is really bad. This is a really bad allegation here. In 2006, she was a 7. I don't know what the legal age of consent in Georgia is. Maybe that's something we'll get into in another video. But I mean, this just kind of looks bad, right? Because the insinuation is that they were abusing minors or they were abusing children. That's the insinuation. In 2006, she was a 17-year-old senior at Tri-City High School. She began entering for TNT at their Atlanta studio. On the tour bus and their way back to Georgia, Tiny offered Jane Doe one and another high school intern a drink. This was the first time she ever drank. She began feeling sick, and Tiny told her she could not drink on any empty stomach. She then handed her 2 pills and told her to swallow them. Oh God, not the Bill Cosby thing. Oh my God, this has Bill Cosby written all over it. We know what has happened to Bill Cosby, and we know what happened with the testimony for Bill Cosby when he said, hey, I do keep drugs around the house, for young women to take so we can. I took that testimony to mean, hey, I keep party drugs over, so when people come over, we can all have fun. We can all take these party drugs and we can, have. That's the way I took it. But I think the way it was presented to the general public is that, hey, he's slipping this in people's drinks. And that's going to be the impression in this case, right? Anyway, let me start over. She began feeling sick, and Tiny told her you couldn't drink on an empty stomach. She then handed her 2 pills, told her to swallow them. It would make her feel better. She thought the pills were Tylenol. Oh my God, not Tylenol. So, so this is a little suspect to me because I wonder if they are just really taking everything verbatim from the Bill Cosby playbook to make things look bad. They know that Bill Cosby has been convicted. So I wonder if they're saying, hey, let's make this sound like the same thing that happened in the Bill Cosby case. So I wonder. So sorry, I'm just going off on a rant. She thought the pills were Tylenol, but she started feeling hot and sweaty within minutes and swallowed them. She began hallucinating and felt like she was floating. Tiny and everyone on the bus started laughing at her. Tiny told her to come to the back of the bus where the bedroom was located. She told her to undress so she can cool off. She took her top off but began throwing up. At the time, T.I. came to the back and sat next to her. She complimented her on her completion and told her she was very pretty. Tiny then told her to keep drinking because that was the only way to sober up. She passed out and wakes up on the following morning naked on the bed with the other high school intern and another young girl. She was bleeding from her private parts. I'm saying private parts, but you guys see what that is, right? She felt that she was on her cycle, but then realized her her how do we get over this word? She realized that something was taken away, right? She also felt discomfort in her on her back end, right? She put her cloths on and went to the front of the bus where Tiny said, "Oh, you're feeling okay, Pooh? You are feeling okay?" She was like, "Girl, I'm jealous of you because my man wants you." When they arrived in Atlanta, Clay and an employee of TNT asked her how she was getting home. She said her mom and Clay told her no, and offered to drop her home. Tiny called him on this phone and told him to make sure he stops off at the pharmacy to get Jane Doe #1, a morning after pill. He then makes her swallow the pill and warn her that she needs to learn to keep her mouth shut if she wants to make it in this business. He told her that if she did not, bad things could happen to her and her family. That night, Sunday, she slept and defecated on herself because she lost all control of her bowels. She went to school and where she defecated on herself again. Her aunt came and took her to the hospital where she learned that she was defecating on herself due to trauma caused by her rear end cavity due to intense penetration. Wow. Wow. This is just crazy. I hope this isn't true. Like I said, I don't know if any of this stuff is true or not. I just really pray it's not true because it's all sounding like a Bill Cosby story, right? Actually, this is a little worse than the Bill Cosby story. So, in my personal opinion, there are going to be records of the hospital visit. So of course they're going to want to pull those, and so it's going to get crazy because then if there's hospital records that she actually lost control due to damage to her rear end or damage to penetration, that's going to be on the hospital record, and it's going to be damning if they can tie this in to Ti and Tiny. uh, I would also wonder if they did a drug test when she went to the hospital. It to me it seemed like they would do that if she went to the hospital and she told the full story. But maybe if the allegations are true that she was threatened not to tell the full story, that maybe when she went to the hospital she just said, hey, I'm having problems with my bowels or whatever. But this is a crazy story. This is absolutely crazy, and like I said, I hope it's not true. Just moving on. Alias Tina, date of birth 9/25/2006, offer of drugs and felt up by TNT, and a March assault case, right? I'm saying assault, a lack of a better word. I don't want to get flagged by YouTube, but you can see the word there, right? So this is in New York City and Atlanta, Georgia, so two different locations. This should be interesting. Tiny invited her in 2006 to attend a party at the W Hotel in NYC. They went back to the party and went back to their hotel with a group of women. She did not drink or do drugs. Ti and Tiny sandwiched her on the couch and attempted to convince her to take pills. And she told them she was on her period and left. She and Tiny stayed in touch, and Tina moved to Atlanta in 2007. Tiny invited her to the studio in January 2007 and passed her off to her security, Cedric Zealous, Alpha Mega. Tina rejected his advances, and he grabbed her phone, put his number in, called himself, and began stalking her nonstop for months. She ignored him until she saw him again 2 months later. At the second encounter, Alpha Mega grabbed her up and put a gun to her head. He then blindfolded her, put her in his car, and drove 20 to 50 minutes to Georgia. He assaulted her, assault in lack of a better word, her 3 times with a 24-hour window, drove her back to the studio and gun whipped her, threatened to kill her if she spoke. Shortly after, she received a phone call from T.I. threatening her to never come to his studio again. So this story just sounds suspect, and it doesn't sound like something that Ti and Tiny would do. In my personal opinion, of course, it's just my opinion. And even when you read the story, it has absolutely nothing to do with Ti and Tiny. It just says that somehow Alpha Mega, the security guard, uh, somehow gets involved with Tina, right? So let's see what it reads. It says Tina invited her to the studio in January 2007 and passed her off to the security guard, Alpha Mega. So we don't know what passing her off is, right? So passing her off could have been, take this young lady home. We don't need her in the studio. It could have been something like that. And then it basically goes on to say that, this security guard who's known as Alpha Mega assaulted her. So it doesn't say that T.I. and Tiny actually did that. So this allegation, in my personal opinion, shouldn't be in this letter. If you want to charge Alpha Omega in a separate lawsuit, then you should do that. But in my personal opinion, this allegation shouldn't be here. What do you guys think, right? Anyway, moving on, we go on to the next allegation. Tamika Williams is the alias, right? Actually, this is not an alias. This is just a name, right? Let's see. Yeah, so this is just this person's name. They just put it out here. Tramika Williams, right? Date of birth, December 12th, 2009 to present. Atlanta, Georgia, and it just says summary. She was not assaulted or she was not a assault victim or drugging victim. She lends credence to Sabrina Peterson's assertion that T.I. put a gun to her head and threatened to kill her in December 2009. She was pregnant when T.I. and a group of his associates kicked in her front door, put guns to her son's head, 8 years old, 6 years old, and 4 years old, and made them go to the closet. They then beat up her ex-husband at the time and kidnapped him. It was 3 p.m. They called the police and the Atlanta PD came, investigated, and did nothing after. Then it goes on to say, they lived in fear of being killed ever since. She lived in a hotel with her family for over a month and consistently moved around. She has not lived in any location for more than a couple of years. T.I. sent multiple people to her house on multiple occasions telling her to keep her effing mouth shut. So I don't know what went down with Sabrina Peterson and T.I. and what actually happened, but apparently this is a witness to the allegations that T.I. put a gun to her head. And from reading this, I believe what she's trying to say is that not only was she a witness, but because she's a witness, she feels threatened and she's suffered emotional distress because she's had to move around and she's been in fear of being killed, allegedly and insinuating Ti. So just moving on. So Ashley is the next alias, and then 2006, 2006, two times in 2006, 2007, and 2015. It goes on to say forced to take ecstasy, Molly, painkillers, and other drugs. This caused her to have an addiction. Wow. So I thought ecstasy and Molly was the same thing. Break it down if you know the difference between ecstasy and Molly. Me personally, I thought they were the same thing. I've never taken either. But I've always been in the impression that Molly is the street name for ecstasy, or actually ecstasy is the street name as well. But Molly was just another name for ecstasy. So anyway, let's get into the story. Met Tiny in the 8th grade. They were best friends. She knew Tiny before she joined the group Escape. In 2005, Tiny approached her to work as their assistant. She never paid or compensated for any of the work completed. She and Tiny were pregnant at the same time together. T.I. forced her to take multiple ecstasy pills. On occasion, T.I. stood over her and Tiny stood close by, and T.I. forced her to open her mouth, swallow 8 ecstasy pills. Wow. That sounds like overdose to me. She has personally witnessed women complaining of being kidnapped and held against their will for days at a time. She has witnessed a woman crying in a corner because T.I. and Tiny would not let her leave and forced her to take excessive number of drugs, right? So this is all hearsay, right? Because you're saying you witness other women being a victim of this abuse, but we ourselves don't have those women come out and tell their stories. So everyone knows that this is what I believe the definition of hearsay, because you're saying what you witness happened to someone else, but we don't have that person in front of us to actually tell their own story, right? So we may never have the ability to tell whether this story is true or not, because it's all based on your word or hearsay, right? So anyway, as a result of being in Tiny and T.I. circles, she developed a drug addiction and bipolar disorder. She has been clean for 15 months. She has medical records to show the extent of her addiction before working with T.I. and Tiny. She was a real estate agent. She worked in real estate industry and had a growing career. She had no prior medical history of drug abuse or mental behavioral disorders. So this claim to me personally is just all nonsense, because I can't be held responsible for your drug addictions, right? So the allegation is that Ti or Tiny got her started to take the allegations that Ti or Tiny got her started taking drugs, and now that she's become an addict, she's blaming them. Well, I mean, you took the drugs by choice, right? That was your choice. And how do we know you didn't have an addiction before you met Ti and Tiny? Um, Either way, this probably won't go well for Ti and Tiny because I believe there's actually some evidence of them being arrested and having pills, Molly or ecstasy, in their possession when they were arrested. So, this is not going to look good, but I think this is kind of a weak claim. To me, it just seems like you're just throwing this in there just to stack all the allegations. You want to have as many allegations as you possibly can to make these people look bad. So you're just throwing this in there. And me personally, I think if anything, this is a civil suit. This is not a criminal suit. If you were taking drugs with your friends and your pals and you became addicted, my personal opinion, that's your fault. You take personal responsibility for that, right? Um, Moving on, alias LT, date of incident, October 2017, Atlanta, Georgia. An intern of Grand Hustle Studios invited her to visit the studio. They went to Chipotle before visiting the studio. She went inside and sat in one of the rooms. She placed her bags down as well as her food. She went outside with the intern to tour the grounds. She returned 30 minutes later and ate her food. She immediately felt dizzy and lightheaded. The intern left her in the lobby and she went back to the studio. When she returned, she informed him that she had to leave. The security guard was laughing. She ran outside. She ran into the streets and called her roommates to pick her up in a cab. They came and she began hallucinating in the car. She called her mom, who was a psychiatrist, and demanded to return home to Maryland. Her mom told her that she believed she was slipped a date rape drug. She went to a detox clinic where she sobered up. So, you know what? Some of these stories sound damning, and then some of them just sound a little suspect because if your mom suspected that you were slipped a date rape drug, in my personal opinion, if I thought that happened to my child, I would try to get the police involved right away. And then from there, you would get a drug test, right? That's what I believe, right? So then it goes on, and this is the conclusion. As of the date of this letter, my office has been in process of vetting two additional victims who have come forward with claims of drug and kidnapping, and I'm just going to say assault. One of the women alleges that she was exposed to a STD, right? And we already know that R. Kelly is actually uh, facing charges, criminal charges, might I add, for the exposure of exposing someone to an STD. So, this is a little damning if that person actually comes forward. This matter's breadth and complexity requires your jurisdictional powers and resources to tackle and end the stream of depravity being committed by TNT. My clients and their witnesses are prepared to speak with investigators and prosecutors from your office. Thank you for your time and considerations. Kind regards, Tyrone A. Blackburn, Esquire. So, man, look, there you have it. I think that some of the stuff in here is 100% total BS. Nonetheless, I think the authorities will want to investigate. I also think that some of the stuff here is damning, and it's basically going to be over. In my personal opinion, it will definitely be over for T.I. and Tiny if the authorities press charges. Let me know what you think. Do you think that the authorities will press charges? And what do you think is going to happen after the authority presses charges? Do you think it's definitely going to be over for T.I. and Tiny? Me personally, I think it will be, because basically, win or lose, what's going to happen is that you're going to be tied up in a lawsuit that's probably going to last for the next, 3 or 4 years, and you could potentially end up going to jail, and this is going to drain your resources. At this point, I think Ti and Tiny don't have the ability to go to the victims and say, hey, let's just go ahead and settle out of court because this has already been presented to the authorities. Even if you make a settlement out of court to appease the alleged victims, the criminal prosecution may still move ahead. So that's pretty much it for this video. Leave your questions, comments below. Do you think that the authorities are going to press charges? Do you think the authorities should press charges? Do you think that anything that I've read to you is actually damning against T.I. and Tiny? Do you think that it's definitely over for T.I. and Tiny? Questions or comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe.